me is not necessarily like one big bang kind of aha moment. It's more of like a discovery and then these iterative breakthroughs that just continue over and over again as long as you continue to desire and seek them out.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Jordan Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Conversations about the defining moments that shape our lives. On this show, I talk to friends, family, colleagues, you name it, about the shared experience we all have with breakdowns and breakthroughs, how they happen, when they happen, and how we navigate through them to ultimately find success in our lives. Today's episode is sponsored by Audible. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have the time, or should I say I don't make the time anymore to read books. You know what actually I've come to discover is that I'm more of an auditory learner. I like to listen to stuff more than I like to read it. And the listening to it seems to sink into my thick skull better than reading it. So anyway, what I'm saying is I do have time to listen to books when I'm not enjoying a podcast, of course. So for a limited time, you can try Audible and get 2 free audiobooks. You just visit my website, breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com, and follow the link on the homepage to take advantage of this sweet deal. This episode is also brought to you by Amazon Fresh. Now, if you're like me and you have a busy schedule, you got kids and you've got sports practice and rehearsals and play dates and school pickup and drop off, and you don't have a nanny or a staff, and you have a job to go to, then Amazon Fresh could be the answer. I mean, it's the answer for me. It's super easy. It's super convenient. So skip the checkout line and have fresh groceries delivered to your door. This is a limited time offer. You just got to visit breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com to get the $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. Click the Amazon Fresh link and get your $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. Today on the show, I've got a great guest. The man's name is Sean Murphy. He has a background in sales and executive leadership roles with companies such as CNET Networks and CBS Interactive in the computer software and digital media sector. Sean is also a skilled entrepreneur with experience in the startup arena. And, little fun fact, the man just happens to be my baby brother. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know, this show, one of the main things about this show is speaking to people from all different walks of life. Not only, friends, family, colleagues, but people who come from different backgrounds. And, obviously you and I share a background, but your employment, your career over the last 25 years has been very distinct from mine. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and why you got into the industry that I tell people when I explain to them what my brother does, that he's in the NSA, because I can't explain what you do. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into it?
Sure. And who knows, maybe I am in the NSA and you just don't know it.
You have to kill me if I found out.
Right. Totally possible. So just quick background because it ties together. When I was in college, I had aspirations of being a writer. I actually started off in the School of Journalism at University of Oregon and then to being an English major because I just didn't like the structure and the construct of journalism as a field of study. And so between my sophomore and junior year of college, which was in 1994, I wanted to get an internship with a publishing company. And I didn't really care what publishing company. I just figured it would be good experience and exposure and learning and so forth. And so actually through Dad, I managed to get an internship at IDG, which stands for International Data Group, and which still exists today. And IDG is a tech publisher, which wasn't the sexiest thing in the world. But again, like I said, it's a publishing company. That's what I wanted to do. And I got attached to the marketing group, not the, closest thing to journalism and writing, but still within the publishing company. And what I discovered while doing this internship was two things about myself. One was I love writing. I did then and I still do. But writing is a very solitary kind of career. If you're writing novels, if you're writing for a newspaper or a magazine or now websites, blogs, etc., it's something you're largely doing on your own. And the second thing that I realized was that beyond the fact that I didn't want that solitary aspect of a writing career, I loved what the salespeople were able to do. They were able to interact with people on an ongoing basis, different people. They were able to interact and work with all the different groups within the organization. They got to go out and tell a story. If they were good at it, they could be very successful. And it was kind of an aha moment at 19 years old of like, wow, I think this media publishing business is really cool, but actually I don't want to be on the writing side of it. I want to be on the sales side of it because that's more in alignment with who I am and where I see myself going. And so at the time, it happened to be just very lucky for me in that 1994, 95 was when the browser formerly known as Mosaic turned into Netscape. And AOL was just kind of getting its start. And actually that summer had achieved 1 million users, which at the time was considered amazing. And so I was attached to this group of kind of boy and girl genius nerds who were developing this online component to the magazine PC World, which is a very successful tech magazine back in the day. And I got attached to this group. I started learning a ton about the internet. And this was, again, try to remember, this is before everybody had email, and then forget about all the other, advancements that we now take for granted today. And so I went back to college and, was telling all my friends about there's this crazy thing and you can actually send a piece of mail over this thing called the internet and you can open it up and read it and it's awesome. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be so cool. And so when I graduated, I called the guy who I had been working for, this guy named Thomas Gawecki, and he, at that point, was running what was called PC World Online, which had gone from this little 5-person skunkworks team that I was working for in 1994 that was now nearly an 80-person company in 1996. And, hey, Thomas, do you have anything for me? Not really, but you know what? Just come in. We'll figure something out. We'll just attach you to the sales group and who knows. And that would be kind of, the inflection point of the rest is history, where I got into that and, and then, everything went from there and progressed from there.
What is it about now? Obviously it sounds to me like the impetus was originally, like you said, a creative outlet, the idea of writing, right? That was attractive to you, but you had your issues with it, the solitary aspect of it. But then you somehow thought, oh, wait, sales seems interesting to me. That seems a little bit of a jump. A sidestep?
It's less of a jump than people may think because the best salespeople, in my view, are a few different things. One, they are consummate students of their market. They are in constant learning mode, and they're most effective when they understand all the different elements of the industry they're selling within, the company they're selling within, the clients, companies they're selling into, and so that thirst for knowledge, that thirst for learning that, I applied to my English major and that drove a lot of my interest in writing, I was able to apply to sales. The other thing is just communication. So, there is way more, certainly verbal, but written communication that makes or breaks you in sales, how you convey a message, how you follow up with people, how you keep them engaged. All of this is now done over either SMS text or email and so forth. And so that kind of communication, was a great outlet for me of, hey, I'm still writing. I may not be writing the next great American novel, but I'm writing.
You're communicating.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Now, you were with, obviously, PC World, and then obviously the last big elements that you were playing in the computer software and digital media sector with CNET Networks and CBS Interactive, and you were a senior executive. But then a few years ago, you decided to go on it your own, entrepreneur style.
That's right.
What inspired that kind of risky? You had I'm going to suggest, or I'm going to assert that you had a pretty good thing going.
Yes.
and I mean that in the sense of materialistic, monetary security, right? A certain lifestyle that you become accustomed to, and you went, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go stop all that and I'm going to create my own company and see what happens. I mean, again, a risky proposition.
Right.
What inspired that?
So why the fuck did I do that?
Pretty much. What the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah. I mean, there's, like anything, like any life decision, there's a whole bunch of variables, but, to try to boil it down, I would say one would be that same creative drive that, put me into sales in the first place and probably helped me be successful in sales. Just, wanting to build things, grow things, and I guess to put it in one word, wanted to create. So a lot of it was that, I had gotten to a point in my career and in the company I was in that, to your point, it was very comfortable. I had a great life and lifestyle from a material standpoint. But I was getting pretty bored, and I didn't feel like I was actually getting any better at what I was doing. And I certainly didn't feel like I was creating or innovating. And so that was a huge driving force. And then there was kind of more the very basic human, what am I really, what's my legacy going to be? What am I doing? And am I going to leave something in my wake that brings me life fulfillment and that my kids can look at and go, wow, that's something I want to emulate, as far as life behavior and decisions. And so I guess, like use a sports analogy, I wanted to kind of step up to the plate and take a swing and see how I could do. And I knew that if I didn't do it sooner than later, because I was 38, 39 or whatever at the time, then I'm probably not going to do it. So
what do you think? I'm sure there's many answers to this question, but what do you think you learned about yourself in taking that leap and the consequences that came out of it?
That could be like its own podcast, but
maybe we'll do a part two. I guess where I'm going is this. You and I, like, we said we come from somewhat different career backgrounds. I come from the entertainment industry and you come from your industry, and you have had the experience of being in a structured, managerial, top-down environment. Okay. Mm-hmm. Where my side is I'm a lone wolf. I'm my own boss. Right. Yep. And interestingly, later in your years, you decided, hey, I'm going to go be my own boss and see how this works. And when you and I talked, it seems as though your experience with doing Andy and the results that Andy provided and the growth that it provided in you has really left you today very different than you were 3 years ago.
Yeah.
In a way that you might not have been if you hadn't taken the leap and decided to start your own company. That's what I'm getting at. And it's also kind of getting to what the breakthrough you wanted to share about when we talked the other day on the phone, about something you experienced recently stems from, I think. How about this? Why don't you talk a little bit about what I just said, if that inspires anything?
Sure. I mean, fuck, man. Like I would say that I think people, and this kind of, answers the question of what did I learn, that I learned that I believe humans in general have a much higher threshold for pain and a much greater ability to overcome adversity than they give themselves credit for, and that I gave myself credit for. Pretty good at what I did professionally, and I always thought that I was, I persevered and I was driven and ambitious and that sort of thing. But until you're in a situation, and I know you can appreciate this, where you are trying to create something out of nothing, you don't realize what true adversity is and what it is to come into work every day knowing that, company death is imminent and ever present. And so, learning that about myself created a huge amount of inner strength and inner confidence, but it also exposed massive vulnerability and kind of, a sense of like inferiority or, fear or what have you.
Yeah. Doubt.
Exactly.
Doubt. Yeah.
And so when my company met its unceremonious end and was killed by, a big evil platform player out there that will remain unnamed, it starts with the letter G, I was forced to take like major stock of myself and to kind of I guess, do a self-appraisal that I'd never really done of like, what am I doing and where do I want to go? And what's the point of all this shit that I'm doing? And, is it to make millions of dollars and not have to worry about money? Is it to leave some kind of legacy? And so the biggest thing that I learned about myself in doing this were the answers to those questions. And then I really don't believe that if I hadn't taken that jump and even more to the point, if the company hadn't failed, if it had succeeded and I was just kind of cruising along, who knows if I would have, gained that insight. But because it failed, I was forced to kind of come to that crossroads and be like, all right, I'm either going to go into the abyss and become, a hardcore drug addict, alcoholic, and depressed and maybe kill myself, which, that was teetering on the brink, or I'm going to become the person that I know has always been there within me, which is, I will achieve great things. I will be an amazing husband and father and friend and so forth. And so going through that whole experience of starting the company and building the company and having it fail and so on, revealed all of that within me.
Yeah. I love talking to people about these kinds of life experiences because we're all just not that different. It's unfortunate that it requires that kind of adversity for us to take a close look inside. Mm-hmm. And, I heard a quote recently and it said, if I go within, I will never go without. Mm-hmm. And I just love the eloquence of it. But oftentimes, if things are going fine and everything's good and life is fantastic and you feel great, and we don't stop to assess. And breakthroughs, in my experience, is really just that. It's standing at a crossroads and just having to make a choice. Do I go this way or that way? And oftentimes the breakdown is the result of not choosing powerfully. And like you said, you could have chosen to just give up and go down a very, very dark path. You chose to go the other way. And I think that you have a number of breakthroughs that you've obviously just kind of touched on in this conversation. But what you and I talked about yesterday, which I thought was an inspiring conversation, which also kind of touches on where you could have gone, which was addiction, right? Mm-hmm. You could have fallen deeper into that. Now, I mean, you and I obviously have a biological predisposition to addiction, and I've had my own battles with it. But what you shared with me about was your confrontation with smoking marijuana.
Yep.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. What inspired it, why you did it, and what strategy you used
to tackle the addiction.
To tackle the addiction. Well, yeah, to tackle specifically, I guess, the marijuana smoking. Because, I mean, I'm not sure, what else you want to get into, but I know the marijuana was one of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started getting high when I was, kind of late teenager. So, as you know, I was heavily into sports as a kid. That was kind of what defined me. And the end of my senior year of high school, I wasn't sure if I was going to continue on with sports going into college. And that for whatever reason seemed to coincide with deciding that was a good time to get high and start getting high on a pretty regular basis. And I had plenty of friends all around me who, that was like their main pastime. And so I joined in and subsequently went off to college and ended up not continuing to play sports in college. And I can look back on that now, not with regret, but with a sense of acknowledgement of like, probably had something to do with the fact that I was high all the time. And so that just continued on in my adult life. And it became hardwired into my behavior. And, it didn't really matter what the situation was. It wasn't like I needed to have some kind of major crisis and stress to drive me to want to get high. It was just became a part of me.
It was a habit. It was literally a habit.
Yeah. And then, what happened is that habit then evolved and became something that, I guess kind of falls into the true definition of addiction, meaning that like I was aware of the fact that it wasn't good for me, that it was affecting my life, like elements of my life, and not necessarily like in like the way that, maybe Hollywood would portray. Like I wasn't like falling over or losing a job or,
right.
Losing my marriage or what have you, but it was subtle, the way I would engage people, the way I would engage my work, and so on and so forth. And so anyhow, so when,
what also kind of, it speaks to me, it also kind of suggests to me what you were on this journey to explore how to become your best self also, that this was getting in the way of that. I had a similar experience many years ago when I was really kind of cleaning shop, if you will. And the clearest thing that seemed to be in the way of my success and moving forward to the next level in my life was drinking. And it was like, I couldn't get away from it. I couldn't not address it. And it sounds kind of like what you were doing.
So that's, that's right where I was going, which is, so when all of this shit went down with my company, not surprisingly, the first thing that I turned most heavily towards was getting high. And not like I was like doing it anew. I'd always been doing it, even while I was in the midst of growing Yandy. But then all of a sudden I had more time on my hands. I had certainly had a lot more negative emotions rolling through. And so, it just became more of an issue. And so when I started going through this, what I'm now very much in the midst of, this kind of transformation and, learning more about myself and taking steps to change my behavior and change my attitude and judgment and so forth. Like you just said, the number one thing that I saw standing in my way of really kind of achieving that goal in a holistic sense was getting high. And I like most drugs, not all, but I like most drugs. Drinking, I can take it or leave it. I like to have a drink, but it's not like a big deal for me. Whereas weed has always been like the vice. And so as much as I would like rationalize it, like, oh, everything's gonna be cool. I'm okay. I can do this. It's the weekend, whatever. It kept coming back to this. I would do it over a weekend. And it was almost like I was starting all over again on Monday. I'd have to like reinforce these goals that I had. And I had to reinforce this sense of like inner strength that I had built up over the prior week. Right. And I just kind of got to the point where I was just like, fuck this, man. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of thinking about it. I'm tired of battling with it. And I don't have any illusions that like somehow this addiction is just going to go away. And I don't think that's what recovering from addiction is all about. I think it's more about learning how to deal with it. And so anyway, I started doing research and trying to find ways to confront this. And the thing that I found that was the most in alignment with my current belief system and my current way of living was and is hypnotherapy.
Right. To back up really quickly. Sorry to interrupt you, but just to back up really quickly, it's interesting that because we're talking about marijuana, we're not talking about smoking cigarettes, we're not talking about drinking, we're not talking about heroin, we're talking about smoking marijuana. There's something kind of sneaky about the habit of smoking marijuana because it's not necessarily a physical addiction like something like heroin or even alcohol is. There's something more mental and emotionally addicting about it. So it's somewhat elusive. So you decided to jump into hypnotherapy, and I want you to keep going, but I just wanted to interject something because hypnotherapy brings with it a whole host of conversations. Agreement on one side, disagreement on another side. Does it work? Is it a hoax? Is it the occult? So many aspects of it that can be incredibly empowering or disempowering depending on the perspective and depending on what you understand about hypnotherapy. And I read just a definition of the profession of hypnotherapy as defined in the Dictionary of Occupational Titles published in the United States Department of Labor, that hypnotherapist induces hypnotic state in a client to increase motivation or alter behavior pattern through hypnosis. They also consult with clients to determine the nature of the problem. They prepare clients to enter a hypnotic state by explaining how hypnosis works and what clients will experience. They test subjects to determine degrees of physical and emotional suggestibility. And it goes on and on. It's a very specific, clinical, studied space that has proven results, medical proven results over and over again. And there's so many myths about it, but tell me a little bit about what you learned and why you decided hypnotherapy was the right way to go. Yeah.
So, kind of sounds like you did the same. I did a ton of research on it. I read all about it in a general sense. I read about practitioners in my area. I found one that, seemed to have the most hours under his or her, in this case, his belt, had the most, kind of positive and detailed reviews on what people had experienced through him. And I'm kind of a combination art and science mind. Like I like data to prove out concepts and thoughts and ideas, but I'm also not opposed to believing in things that you can't necessarily touch or feel or see. And hypnotherapy would certainly fall into that category. And one of the main things that's worth noting that I read about hypnotherapy is that actually in wars prior to anesthesia, hypnosis was used as a means of helping people deal with pain and specifically get through things like amputation. Kind of crazy to think about. There's no anesthesia, so I have to cut off your leg. Sorry.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna hypnotize you.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well, it's interesting because hypnotherapy kind of slips into its own space, separate from the medical profession, which tends to treat the physical, or the psychology space that handles the more mental. The hypnotherapy is more technically called vocational and avocational self-improvement. And in simple language, these are things that do not qualify as a medical disorder or as an emotional or a mental disorder. And in the scope of health services, these are little things. But as we know, it's the little things that a majority of people are struggling with. And addiction, smoking, migraines, sleeping, all those things are a part of that. So continue.
So anyway, the thing that's really interesting about it, and I think why what you just said is true, is because you're talking about issues of consciousness and subconscious, and attempting to tap into those planes of existence. And it's hard to define that stuff. It's kind of nebulous. And so, what happened in my case, and I think generally happens in hypnotherapy, is not necessarily what, is portrayed in movies and TV. It's not like a trance-like state where I don't know, or a person doesn't know what's going on. Like I could explain to you exactly what happened throughout the entire session with this person. But what's
happening in hypnotherapy is you're actually hypnotizing yourself.
Yeah.
The hypnotherapist is guiding you, obviously, from their experience, but you're actually doing it. And another part of the myth that I think is interesting is that people say, oh, well, only the weak-minded people are susceptible to hypnotherapy, which is actually quite the opposite. It actually requires a great deal of focus and creative thinking to hypnotize oneself.
Yeah, and I would say the main thing you have to believe in, which I've been reading a ton about over these last number of months, is the notion of brain plasticity. That our brains are not in a fixed state, that we can continually learn, we can continually change. Maybe we can even change things that most people thought were set in stone, like personality traits.
And this is something that actually has to be unlearned by our culture.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so so I think, one, in order to enter into hypnotherapy and have the chance of it working, is you need to believe that. You need to believe that this me today is not a fixed thing, that the me tomorrow and, years to come can be whatever I want it to be. That it's, and it's kind of why now I have like this newfound love for George Lucas and Star Wars, because I believe in the Force. I mean, to me, the Force is simply a matter of just deciding this is what I want to be and this is who I want to be, and I'm just going to make it happen. These are not the droids you're looking for. And so that's kind of, a belief system that I now deeply subscribe to. And so when I went into hypnotherapy, I kind of had the perfect mindset for it. And so in doing it, and what the hypnotherapist explained to me, and then what we did in practice, was not a matter of like, okay, well, I'm just now going to somehow magically rid you of these urges to get high and you're no longer going to be addicted to marijuana, but more of I'm going to help you alter the pathways when you encounter those urges. So if you think of like a really basic example, when you drive home at night, every night, the last thing you do before you turn into your driveway is make a left turn. That is hardwired into your brain and is just a pathway that you don't even have to think about. And so that's essentially what had happened with me in relation to my urges to get high, and what happens to just about anybody who has an addiction issue is you have the urge to get high or drink or whatever your thing is. And then that pathway just it's already there. It's hardwired. You're just going there. Oh, I'm home now. My kids are in bed. I'm finished with work for the night. I've worked out. I'm going to go get high.
We've all had that experience, driving home, that automatic pilot experience of driving home, and suddenly you're starting your drive, and before you know it, you're getting off your on-ramp and you don't even remember being on the freeway.
Yeah, and it's the same thing.
But you got there because you're on autopilot. So much of our daily life is this narrative that we've written and yet kind of left it on autopilot and forgotten about. And, when I was drinking, it was when it got at its worst. There were many times I was drinking and didn't even want to drink.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, that became the majority of the time I was getting high. I mean, fuck, dude, I would go to my kids' swim meets on a Saturday morning, and I'd be kind of hungover because, maybe a concert the night before with Courtney. And I'd be like, oh, I got to be at the swim meet all day. It's going to be brutal. And I'll just bring my vape pen with me and take a couple of hitties here and there throughout the day. And again, it was just mindless. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then I wouldn't think about it until I would get home, and I'd be like, the fuck am I doing, man? It's not what I want to be or who I want to be. So,
and I think it's that being able to kind of catch yourself right in that moment and go, whoa, is what I like to believe is ultimately the possibility of us becoming mindful individuals in a rigorous fashion, because like you said, you got up, you did your thing, you had your coffee, you had your breakfast, you went, you did all that stuff on autopilot. But the idea of having a mindful state that when you wake up, you're conscious of what you're doing as opposed to unconscious of what you're doing is also part of that path. And perhaps, at least in my experience, what hypnotherapy can allow to help alleviate some of that autopilot.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, I like the way that the guy explained it to me, which makes complete sense to me, is, your subconscious is there to project the image of what you want or think you want out into the physical world. And so, what we're doing here with hypnotherapy is we're just simply changing the projection. We're changing what that image is. And so instead of, doing all of what you just described and then capping it off with, oh, okay. And so naturally now I'm going to take a couple of hits off the vape pen. It's something else. And so
the subconscious mind has no judgment of actually what you're thinking. You can place truth or lies into your subconscious mind and it doesn't care. But if you continue to reinforce those thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs then become habits, and those habits become your life. And so the interrupting of those records, if you will, the scratching of those records, the disappearing of those narrow pathways that have been entrenched in your subconscious is what hypnotherapy helps us to do. And it's an ongoing process. There are certain aspects of, now this is what I want to ask you. So you went to a session. It was like an hour and a half, something like that.
Hour and a half. Yeah.
Okay. And you had the result that you had. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, because it's an hour and a half, obviously, give me a Reader's Digest, for those of you who are old enough to understand what a Reader's Digest is, version of the actual session and then the aftermath.
Sure. So the first 45 minutes was just conversation, talking about, just talking, kind of getting to know each other, small talk type stuff, a little bit about what hypnotherapy is and how this particular practitioner practiced it. And then me talking about my marijuana addiction and kind of where it started and why I do it and what kind of circumstances typically preempt it and so forth. And then the following 45 minutes was the actual hypnosis itself, which, I mean, parts of it are very much like what you would, see portrayed in a TV show or a movie. Like, he used this kind of cool looking seashell and did the whole, like follow this here and follow this there. And then now you close your eyes. And then we went through and essentially had a affirming conversation with all the various core elements of me, the stubborn element of me, the rebellious element of me, the creative element of me, the adolescent 17-year-old boy who started getting high in the first place element of me, and so on and so forth. And what you're doing there is you are making a commitment to what it is that Sean wants to do, and then getting agreement and support kind of in that, in a way, it's almost like external accountability that you could normally get from somebody who's like a friend or a brother or a sister or what have you, or a spouse, but you're getting that from within.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's part of the key of it. You can't just do hypnotherapy and hope it's going to work if you kind of want to stop smoking. You got to be super committed to stopping whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Which is, it's an odd part of it, because there are tons of reasons why I wanted to stop and want to stop. And there's, that one main reason that we talked about a handful of minutes ago, really what kind of drove me to this Thursday. But, it's like, and it kind of was like this to me. It's, it's like the girlfriend that you love, stepping out on your wife with, because it's just something different that you're not,
I call her
that you really
mistress.
Don't want to give up, but you need to.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, shit, dude, like I still love weed. I think it's awesome. There's parts of it that I right now can think about fondly.
So there was a little bit of fear about actually saying adios to Mary Jane.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, there still is, because, it's not like, and the thing that was cool is the guy pointed this out, is he's like, it's not like, all of a sudden this thing is gone forever. There may even be a time, whether it's next week or next year or 5 years from now, when you get high again. That's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that somehow this has all failed and it's not going to work and you have to start from ground zero, because that thing is always there. And so there's still an element of fear there. But what I definitely feel, back to your question, get back to the point, is, so there was the experience itself. There was that day. I felt very mellow, very relaxed. And I guess obviously was thinking a lot about, getting high and not getting high and what it was going to be like. Right. And how is this going to work? And
a little bit.
Is it going to work? Yeah. And then the following few days, and it was intense for the next 3 days and has continued to dissipate, since probably Sunday, were, to put it in a very scientific way, emotionally funky. It was almost like I felt initially like it was a purge, but it wasn't necessarily an emotional purging. It was more of all of these different thoughts and feelings and emotions that, either were kind of sort of present in my life, but most of them were like things I hadn't even thought about in years or felt in years, started to come up. And
think about like a big glass jar full of water with a bunch of sediment at the bottom, and then you stick a spoon in it and you stir it up.
Yep.
That seems to me to be what you're explaining.
Yeah, it is. And the big glass jar is my subconscious.
Right.
And, and all that shit is the sediment. And, and so it all got stirred up. And so, I started having these vivid dreams, starting that night and through Sunday, about all kinds of stuff, about our parents and about my marriage and about things I'd done in the past and, about my current relationship with Taylor. And, all this kind of stuff started to kind of come up inside, and it felt really uncomfortable. And I every morning I get up and I read and I write. And so the way that I was managing myself through it was I would write about it, and I would kind of like explore it and attempt to understand it. And the more I was doing that, and the more that, the days were going by, the more emboldened I was feeling, not just about how I relate to my addiction to marijuana, but just, kind of this general path that I'm on of just feeling this sense of joy and fulfillment, which I've been feeling for the last number of months, but was like reinforced all over again by doing this, because I guess I'm not doing this intentionally, by the way, but it does kind of tie the loop back to the core of what you're doing with your podcast was, breakthrough to me is not necessarily like one big bang kind of aha moment. It's more of like a discovery, and then these iterative breakthroughs that just continue over and over again as long as you continue to desire and seek them out
and make choices. and make choices and take actions.
Yeah. And so this was like, this was one where I was like, okay, you know what? The fact that it's hurting and it's painful and it feels really uncomfortable probably means that it's working. Like probably means that it's
completely agree, because this, my understanding at least, or the way I think about the ego, is that the ego is there to protect us, and it gathers information and it uses it to what it thinks it's doing is protecting us, right? So the idea of you suddenly stopping this really great coping mechanism for not confronting certain aspects of your life or numbing out certain aspects of your life being removed sounds like a serious 911 event to the ego. And I think all hands on deck in that sense of, we're not going to let this go. We're going to hold on to this, and like literally with its claws holding on to keeping its place in your life.
Yep.
And you're battling with that. You're going, no. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, it's not over. How many sessions do you do? Do you do one? Do you do three? How does that work?
I did one. I, at this point, don't plan to do another one. And really that's one that's not uncommon. I mean, with this guy in particular, and from what I read with hypnosis in general, that, and this will sound unbelievable to people who are listening to this, but, there are multiple instances with this guy in particular of people who quit smoking cigarettes after one session, or quit getting high on marijuana after one session. I can't speak to other addictions, but
it's a very personal, I think it's a very personal experience, like we've said.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So anyway, so, I had a session and I don't plan to have another session. And that seems to be pretty normal. And that, it's not like psychotherapy, that which you and I have talked about at length in the past, that, it's kind of this ongoing, exploration, discovery, try to resolve, et cetera, rinse and repeat. This is more of like, go down into the subconscious, shake the shit up, see if you can create some new pathways, and then, and see how it takes. So that's where I'm at now.
Got it. What kind of, I guess, because you're walking in a new environment, you're walking through your life literally in a new environment, saying, okay, I'm putting that crutch in the closet. I'm not going to access that crutch any longer, right? Do you have support systems or strategies in place to navigate?
Yeah, which, luckily I had done a lot of this work already. So, the hypnotherapy is more of like a component part of what I've been doing for the last number of months. And a big part of what I've been doing for the last number of months is creating a structure that is far more conducive to daily joy, happiness, fulfillment, and ultimately achieving the success in life that I want to achieve. And I don't just mean that in a material sense, although that's part of it. And so for me, to be specific, every day, and I happen to be a early morning person, so I do it early in the morning, but every day I wake up and I read for probably 45 minutes to an hour, and then I write in a journal for about the same amount of time.
Are you reading content? Are you reading content that is in the space of self-improvement, personal development, or are you reading CNN?
Definitely not CNN. In fact, a part of the life decisions and changes that I made was to take my daily consumption of news and entertainment, what have you, out of my life, because it was only having a negative effect on my life. Yep. And I used to love that shit. I'd read everything I'd get my hands on. So no, it's yes, it's a lot of it's kind of self-improvement.
What are you reading right now? What would be something you're reading right now in the morning?
So I'm reading a book called Blue Zones right now, which is all about the study of people who have the longest lifespans, centenarians in some cases, and what it is about their life that enables them to live that long. Because as I've read now, only 25% of our lifespan is dictated by our genetics. Kind of a nice fun fact. And so it's all about their eating habits and their relationship engagement and everything. And so, like self-improvement always has this negative connotation because people judge it and attach a stigma to it. Like, oh, well, I guess you're weak and fucked up. And so you're just trying to find some way to improve yourself, which I now find to be laughable.
It's ridiculous.
And so I look at it more as self-actualization reading. really the stuff that I'm reading is all about attempting to understand the human condition and my human condition and what I can do to learn as much about myself. And, to the point you made of just being mindful, being aware, being in every moment and living in every moment. And how do you do that? And what are the things you can do? So anyway,
what do you do? And what do you do consciously to support a space, an environment that provides a positive, I always, hesitate to use certain words. I mean, obviously I'm assuming the people who listen to this will be kind of on the same page, but energetically, a harmonious vibration, if you will. And you watch or you listen to certain content, it gives you a negative vibration. If you read and dwell on certain concepts, they give you a positive. Bottom line, if it makes you feel good, do it. If it makes you feel bad, don't.
Right. Well, I mean, yes and no, because, a lot of what, I would say that what I'm reading, I'm probably reading, 2 to 3 books at any given time. And they can be kind of the meaty, dense, almost textbook-like type books. But then, the other end of the spectrum could be, like The Alchemist, which is just, yes, there's certainly an amazing lesson to be taken from that, but it's a very fun book to read. It's,
right.
It's not like, popcorn candy kind of reading, but it's fun.
Yeah.
I'm constantly reading that stuff. But from a writing standpoint, to the point you just made, oftentimes I'm writing about things that don't make me feel good. I mean, prior to, engaging in hypnotherapy and really taking the addiction head on, I constantly would write about marijuana and how frustrated I was about it and how bad it made me feel inside and how I knew it was affecting my relationships and how I didn't feel that I was being as honest and real with my wife, which is my most important, relationship in life. So that, but in confrontating that discomfort made it real to me,
right.
and kind of, enabled me to address it head on.
Well,
versus
that's the bottom line. That's what I'm saying. I agree with that. If you're acknowledging it, if you're putting it out, you're shining a big fat light on it, such that it doesn't hide anymore. There's also something to be said. I'm not sure if you did this in hypnotherapy also, but there's something to be said about saying, if I continue to do all this stuff that you say you're writing about, or if I continue to do this stuff in my life as a habitual smoker of marijuana, what's my life going to be like a year from now? What's my life going to be like 5 years from now, 10 years, and so to dwell there, it can be very useful to give you leverage to say, you know what, the alternative is much more attractive, which ultimately is, that's that feeling of serenity.
Yeah. So my structure is I learn every day through reading and writing.
Yep.
I don't consume useless shit like playing games on my phone, or I no longer have Facebook or Instagram or any kind of social media apps on my phone. I use that on the web sometimes for the purposes of work, but I don't use it for the purposes of, social engagement. I don't read daily news content. I stay current on, kind of looking at abstracts in newsletters that I subscribe to, like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, so that I'm generally aware of life, kind of daily events, but I don't read anything in depth. I do not spend time with people anymore who are either life suckers or who are just friends of convenience. And have, I guess you could say in some ways ended certain relationships because I was getting nothing out of them and I don't feel I was giving anything to them.
Yeah.
And then conversely, I am deeply invested in the relationships that do matter to me and give all of myself in those relationships, even in the most kind of inane circumstances of, just like standing in front of somebody that I buy coffee from every morning. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Like looking at a person in the eyes. And that whole structure, in addition to having created kind of external accountability factors in my life, like for instance, that I now have monthly goals and you're one of the people I send those to.
Right.
So I'm not the only one who's keeping me in line or who can say, hey, dude.
You're creating structures for accountability.
Yeah. And then, so you could say, hey, what's up with that?
Yep.
And that makes most people feel really fucking uncomfortable. So anyway, doing all of that has given me the structure that I need to get to where I want to go and to kind of back to the, the force that's within us. Yep. Is now I can just decide that there are things that I want to do or want to be, and then they just happen.
And it is that simple. And it's not always, they say it's simple, but not always easy, right? It takes practice. It takes rigor. And like I have a ritual, and you have to engage in a daily ritual, because you can read all kinds of really great books or watch documentaries or TED Talks and be like inspired. But if you're not putting it into practice, it's useless as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So that's what I hear, you're sharing. And I'm glad to hear that you have the structure in place that's going to help you to support this shift in I'm not smoking marijuana anymore. Because, I did the same thing many years ago. I stopped smoking marijuana. I stopped drinking alcohol. Was it super easy? No. Was it a great idea ultimately? Yeah. And what's amazing to me, and we can wrap up here a little bit also, is tell me something that you think about yourself that most people would be surprised to learn, who know you, maybe not personally, but personally, but not like in a business sense or casually, who may have an already predisposition to who Sean Murphy is.
I actually do like Taylor Swift's music. I think it's really good.
Awesome. I've the same thing with Katy Perry.
Yeah, she's a little too poppy for me,
and so is Taylor Swift, bro.
But I feel like Taylor's she's got a little more substance, just a little bit more.
Katy's got substance.
Katy is.
Have you listened to?
Oh no, I have.
Have you listened to her recent songs? The lyrics, she's getting deep, bro.
I celebrate her entire catalog. No, I've not. I've not.
Well, we've learned something about both of ourselves. That's exciting. I did not know that you had an affinity for Taylor.
I know you're asking on a slightly more substantive level.
I mean, honestly, that is actually a really kind of interesting, insightful nugget, to be quite honest.
Because dudes are always like, Katy Perry's stupid, or like little kids, like whatever, dude. I mean, 1989, I think is a fucking great album. I rock out to Style, and the one that had the video has Clint Eastwood's son in it.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think she kicks ass. Like I will put her stuff on, and my kids sometimes even get annoyed at me. Which I think is
fortunately my kids are pretty down with Katy, so I'm happy about that. I can actually put it on the car, and we can actually enjoy it. We have really taken quite a different departure from our conversation, and I'm kind of down with that. What's really interesting about this, though, kind of gets back to what I was going to wrap up with saying, is that the choices that you've made, the path you've taken, has honestly transformed you, as far as I'm concerned, to who you are today compared to who you were 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, dramatically.
Yes.
I mean, I'm assuming you feel it. I'm assuming you're present to it. But Dylan and I have this conversation recently because I'm like, did Sean go to Westworld and they reproduced Sean?
Well, dude, I did have brain surgery 5 years ago, so they may have lobotomized me.
They may have lobotomized you. Something happened, and I'm liking it. The bottom line is I'm liking it, and it's awesome because, I mean, you and I have obviously known each other for quite a long time. And, 20 years ago, I was having conversations with you about meditation and journaling and therapy and things like that, and you were like, whatever. I mean, you tuned me out.
Yes.
And
yes, I did.
For some reason, fortunately, the ones that we've discussed over this last 45 minutes, almost hour, are the catalyst for why I believe all this just works. It just works. There's an opportunity to get to know yourself and to get to know each other on such a broader, deeper level. So why aren't more people doing it, dude? Why aren't more people? When's that tipping point going to happen?
I don't think really ever, dude. I don't think it's going to ever be something that like the world is going to subscribe to this philosophy. And I guess there's the whole adage of never say never.
Well,
but
think about it though. Think about it. Dial back 20 years. And the idea of Deepak Chopra, the idea of Eckhart Tolle, the idea of meditation being spoken of, the secret en masse, where, I mean, once Oprah starts to talk about it, suddenly everybody kind of has at least like a little smidgen of the conversation. And that's where it begins. But you think 20 years ago, I mean, you and I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Berkeley. I mean, we were surrounded by meditation and aura readings. So we were kind of bathed in that possibility. It wasn't so far-fetched for that conversation to be close to us. But the the experience of people dwelling in yoga, meditation, these leading edge conversations, it's happening. It's happening more than it was 20 years ago, and people aren't looking at you as cross-eyed when you bring it up at a dinner party as they used to.
Correct.
So that is what I'm saying as far as growth.
We're both still in pretty progressive environment. You live in LA, I live in the Bay Area. So
right.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that there is there's a heightened awareness. There is kind of a greater interest and acceptance of the types of things we've been talking about for the last hour. And that's awesome. And I think that will continue to evolve. And I think that there's a younger generation who will continue to push that envelope, and then, generations subsequent from there and so on. What I'm saying is I think the most basic and universally shared human emotion of fear is what will kind of always keep this as something that is viewed as an enlightened state versus a normal state. And it's not to say like that I'm sitting here saying, look at how fucking cool you and I are because we're so enlightened, but I do believe that we are enlightened because we've chosen to confront the fear that inhibits all of us from engaging in this behavior. And it's real. It's primal. It's like, God damn, dude, do I really want to admit that I'm addicted to X, Y, or Z, or that I'm really afraid of having a relationship with this person or going after this job or whatever it may be? Like, nobody wants to admit that shit.
Right.
And so that when you do admit that, that's like the first step to becoming enlightened and to kind of developing an understanding of who you really are and what you can actually really be. So, I think we'll get better and I think we'll continue to evolve, but I think that inherent fear is always going to keep this as kind of more of a minority versus a majority thing.
Right. And I think there is something to be said about, hopefully, and I don't know about you, but the younger generation is actually going to start with us. You and I have younger generations in the form of children. And
we talk to them? Fucking
sharing
mom and dad
with them, explaining to them, this is what I've done for a lot of years, and it worked. I got by, but now I'm trying this on, and I got to tell you, it's really turning me on. And I'm going to invite you to consider this because you're like 10 or you're 13. You start this now, you're going to be unstoppable. You're going to be a very powerful individual compared to who I was at 22 or 25 or 30. Right?
Yes.
So
I feel like we're bringing the Jedis back.
That's what I'm thinking. We're going to bring the Jedis back. We're going to keep the Force among us. So, dude, thanks, man, for taking a large chunk out of your day. And we'll have to do this again. But I appreciate your time, man.
All right, dude. I love you, brother.
Love you. Today's episode is sponsored by Audible.com and Amazon Fresh. Check out those promotional giveaways on the front page of my website. Stay tuned for more episodes of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Check out my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com. Stay connected on Instagram at Breakthroughs with Jordan and Twitter at Jordan D. Murphy. And if you have a great story to share, as I'm sure many of you do, go to my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com and shoot me an abbreviated version of your story to my email. I'll give it a read and maybe share a couple of them on the show.